reason that the Templars were accused of heresy is because they revered Gnosticism. They revered the divine connection within the self. And this is why you will find people saying they bought the Grail back, because the Grail is an image of that. This is why they are said to have bought the head of Christ back, because that is also a symbolic representation of the divine in the self. Because at the end of the day, the temple is in our head. You know, there is a part of our head which is actually called the temple. The temple in the Bible is a mathematical and geometric, sacred geometric representation of the human form on the earth. It's bringing heaven down to earth. It is our connection point, and it is in perfect balance. And you can only enter the temple to meet God where the ark is, where God is between the cherubim in balance. You can only enter in there by entering between the pillars in balance. You can't get in by walking into a pillar because you'll hurt yourself. You get in balance, in the center, in the very center point where you will find the self, the divine connection. And the whole story of the Temple of Solomon is about this connection point to the divine in ourselves. And it's a wonderful, fantastic story which is just completely lost to a great many people for a great many reasons. And you know, that's why Freemasons, who basically make their lodges as copies of the temple around the world, are constantly emailing me to say, you know, it's great. The book is fantastic because it's opened their eyes to the truth of what all this is. And a lot of them email in saying, you know, I knew it was that. It took somebody to tell me. It's a fantastic thing because it's what we're all searching for. If we only could see it. This was just one way of doing it. It's been done again and again and again throughout time. The Cistercians went and paid for a great many stories and fables to be written. One of those is, you know, the Grail story itself, Parsifal, where you have to go through a series of balancing tests and you have to raise your energy levels and you have to get through a series of these balancing tests in order to achieve the Grail, to discover yourself, and you have to be pure of heart. You know, it's even there in the tales of King Arthur and Guinevere. The land is only fertile when he is with Guinevere. When they are lanced apart, the land becomes infertile. And the same thing is true of Robin and Marion. Tales of Christ and Mary, Horus and Osiris, and all kinds of different fables throughout time where the two opposites must unite to create this perfect position. And to get onto snakes slightly, Arthur is Pendragon, and it means head dragon. Pen is head, and dragon is a serpent. It's a winged serpent. And Guinevere herself, it means queen of serpents. You can start to see that the serpent is coming in here. You know, even Excalibur, the sword, and he had two swords. People don't realise that. He had two swords, both of which serpent swords. And the word sword itself comes from serpent word, the word of enlightenment. So you go back to Solomon. Solomon was a wise king, but he was a very fiery king. And people said that he was wise, but man is hard. He was so arrogant too, and he said to his people, who is there in the world that does not know of my glory and my fame? And everybody, of course, keeps their mouth shut until a little bird comes along called the whoopoo bird, who whispers in an ear and says, well, actually, there's a woman down the road, the Queen of Sheba, who doesn't know of you. And the land is a very wise and peaceful land, which is slightly in contrast to Solomon's state of being, which is arrogant and overtaxing and overburdensome. And so Solomon says, well, go and tell this woman to come to me. And the journey is supposed to take 7 years, which is a very symbolic number for a great many reasons. It takes roughly 3.5 years to unite Solomon with Sheba. So the two come together in this 7 period. And she is the Queen of Sheba, which is a place called Saba, which is now part of Ethiopia. It means land of serpents, and she was the Queen of serpents. Even Ethiopia comes from the word Ethiopians, which means worshippers of serpents. And their entire history, their fabled history, goes right back to an original serpent deity. So Solomon links up with the Queen of Serpents. Everything is great, the temple is built, and the ark is in place, and they find true wisdom. This is a fantastic fable, which tells us an awful lot more about ourselves and about serpentine history of the world.
What it really brought to me was bringing together the spiritual and the physical. You know, it's that old saying about are we a physical being having a spiritual experience or a spiritual being having a physical experience. And I could really see why the religion of those times would not want you to know the truth of that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is both physical and metaphysical. Religion, especially after when the Romans, because the Romans were there at the time, it's very imperialistic, left-brained, material, physical, imperialistic culture. You can't destroy nations and take them over with a kind of esoteric, metaphysical concept. It just doesn't kind of work, does it, on the physical plane? And so they didn't really want that. They didn't want people to contact divine within themselves and come to peaceful fruition. They wanted goods. They wanted gold and salt and all kinds of things from all over their empire. So they wanted a religion that they could use. And the beauty of it is that the foundations for the religion they chose had already been laid all over the world, because the concepts are the same all over the world. They all derive from an original serpent-worshipping cult which spread around the world. And that can sound completely mad, but it is actually, it's not my discovery. It was discovered in the Victorian age. A great many historians from that period wrote this down. One fantastic book is called Ophiolitrea, the worship of the serpent. It was known, but even in Victorian times, they covered it up. They moved things and destroyed things. They went to India, for instance, and brought back images of a man on a cross being crucified, which predated Christianity. And so they destroyed them. I've actually got some. I've got some of the ones that are left. And you can only find them, these days in drawers in universities or in the back rooms of museums. And these are Krishna. This is Krishna being crucified. This is the Hindu Christ being crucified. It's no different to, images of Quetzalcoatl in the southern Americas. It's no different to Horus. These are physical and metaphysical concepts. In the physical plane, this is the sun that goes down, rests for 3 days at Christmas, and is then reborn. And Horus is the sun on the horizon. This is Horus. This is where we get the word horizon from. Horus. Osiris' father is the sun that is going down at night. I and the Father are one. And he is the one that is resurrecting in the morning. Isis is the moon chasing Horus around the earth. And the same thing is in Christianity. Christ, Mother Mary, I and the Father are one. All these things are related back to Indian Brahmanism and the Naga serpent-worshipping cults and across into Egypt and back into Mesopotamia, Sumer and Africa. What was amazing just recently before Christmas, anthropologists discovered one of the oldest caves where they've discovered the form art of worship, and it goes back for tens of thousands of years. And they're absolutely amazed, believe it or not, that this is they call it the Python Cave, because it's in the image of the serpent, the python. An ancient man, before any Christianity, Judaism, or anything else, was worshipping the serpent. And I was jumping up and down at the point because I thought, oh, great, we've got more archaeological evidence now. We're taking it back yet further in time. And this worship of the serpent is there for many reasons, but certainly one physical and one metaphysical. Physical because the sun was always related to the serpent, because it gave us life. It brought death. It brings life because it brings us energy. We're all solar beings. We're all formed by the energy of the sun. And it brings death because they clocked this thing in the sky, and so many revolutions brought death. It was the great clock in the sky. It's the watch. The reason that watch is around is because it follows the sun around the earth. So it brought life and it brought death, and it was related to the serpent. And that's why all the etymology of the sun and the serpent and solar are all related to the serpent and the snake. Metaphysically, what has been discovered is that when we go into what are known as altered states of consciousness, with these drugs, meditation, dervish, dancing, prayer, isolation, all kinds of different things to get into an altered state of consciousness, what is seen archetypally, that means everybody sees it, is the serpent. Jeremy Narby, famously in his book, I think it was called The Cosmic Serpent, said that it was DNA that man was seeing. When he gets into that infinite place inside of himself, sees the waveform of DNA, the intertwined serpent strands. But I go slightly further than that even, because all life, all energy has a basic waveform, which is why DNA is formed the way it is. I would say that the concept is also the waveform that's being seen. An ancient man even even produced this physically, because at places like Newgrange in Ireland, a very ancient stone circle cum burial ground, they found great big rock carvings which show that the serpent in its wave form. They found that man actually lit fires and played music into the smoke to create waveforms in the smoke, and they created waveforms in perfect bowls of water and sand. So they were manifesting what they were seeing inside in a very shamanic way. And Graham, like I say, Graham Hancock himself went and did the shamanic thing, and his book is just full of serpents because that's what he saw.
Yeah.
Serpents everywhere. So there's no wonder that this is so ancient, and no wonder it's so intrinsic to humanity, because he's used his mind and his imagination to form and to recognize the waveform on the earth.
To me, what it sounded like is alchemists who are manifesting the mystical into the physical.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, people, Jung said it, Carl Jung, he said he was having difficulty finding a link between the Gnostics and modern psychology. And he was struggling, and then he hit on alchemy. Well, alchemy, of course, is the link between the two. It didn't die out. It was kept alive in alchemy. And anybody who knows alchemy properly and has sat and looked at alchemical images will notice that the serpent is throughout. It's always used.
I think I know at the cave it has a huge, it looks like a huge python going into the cave.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen a picture of it.
Yeah, it was all over the news just before Christmas. It's quite incredible.
Yeah, it is. That was amazing.
Yeah.
That's what we're definitely going to get into in the second hour is the secrets of the serpent. I have a number of different things I wanted to ask you about. One of them, have you been to Crete?
Yes.
Good. I've been there. Have you been to a place called Madala by chance?
Yep.
No way.
Yep.
Oh man, I got a story about Madala I could tell you.
Oh, I look forward to it.
Oh, it was a very scary and interesting time.
Really?
Well, at that time I was like 18, and I was just kind of getting into. I mean, I've kind of had a mentor since I was 12 about a spiritual mentor, and so I was a little bit aware at the time. But being 18, you're still kind of new to it. You're not that worldly as yet. It scared the hell out of me, and it was interesting because I'll have to get the picture from a friend who took it, and I'll send it to you. For those that don't know, Madala is a little tiny fishing kind of place in just a couple of little tiny stores there, and my memory is that there's not even anybody that lives there except for in the caves that are surrounding this little inland. There's this old, for lack of better term, cult that lives in these caves and have for centuries. And on one of the piers was written, and to this day I will stand firm and say that it was written in blood. And what it said was, this still freaks me out, it said, "Welcome to Madala, George. Live for today, die tomorrow." And it was a freaky time, let me tell you. Very freaky time. They actually there was almost a person that was killed, and he was pushed off one of the, there's 2 hotels there. One I think that's 3 levels or 4, and then one that's just a ground level. Yeah. And we were staying in the ground level one, and the other people we knew were staying in the 3rd or 4 level one, and one of them ended up getting pushed over. And I tell you, they had things cleaned up. And Madala, as you know, is a ways away from any kind of taxi place or anything like that. And there was a taxi there within 30 seconds, and they were cleaning up the blood with buckets of water. And they had the guy in the back of the taxi, and him and his partner were shoot out. Everything of theirs was tossed into the taxi, and they kicked him right out right then. It was a weird time, I tell you.
No wonder you remember that.
There is stuff that came back from Madala years later. I had an apartment in Amsterdam at the time, and there's a guy there that, again, like 6 months later, wanted us to go back to Madala. And even for like a year and a half later, I was still having kind of weird, I don't want to say dreams, but just weird feelings that there was still energy kind of things coming at me from Madala.
I do think that place is definitely a powerful place. If you want to go down the earth energy, it's definitely on that grid.
Yeah, they've been doing that stuff there for an awfully long frickin' time.
Thousands of years, yeah.
It's too long to get into over the air here, but I tell you, we have to sit and chat about that one sometime. It was pretty interesting.